A commercial airliner carrying hundreds of passengers takes off into the night. Everything appears normal. The weather isn't perfect, but it's far from catastrophic. Pilots exchange routine messages with air traffic control. Families wait for loved ones to arrive. Then suddenly, silence. No distress call. No emergency signal. No warning. A machine worth hundreds of millions of dollars, equipped with some of the most advanced technology ever created, simply disappears. It's as if the aircraft was erased from existence. Search teams scour vast stretches of ocean. Governments launch one of the largest investigations in aviation history. Experts analyze every possible scenario. Yet years later, one question remains unanswered. How can a modern passenger jet carrying hundreds of people vanish without leaving a clear trace? And what if the truth is far stranger than anyone imagined? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Tonight, we're unraveling one of aviation's most chilling mysteries. We'll examine the final moments before the aircraft disappeared. The clues investigators uncovered, the theories that captured worldwide attention, and the disturbing discoveries that raised even more questions than answers. By the end of this story, you'll understand why this mystery continues to haunt investigators, pilots, and families around the world. Let's begin. The night began like thousands of others. At the departure gate, passengers slowly made their way onto the aircraft. Some were returning home after business trips. Others were heading off on vacations, excited for the journey ahead. Families exchanged final messages. Friends said their goodbyes. To everyone on board, it seemed like an ordinary flight. The aircraft was scheduled to travel along a familiar route, carrying its passengers across vast stretches of ocean toward its destination. The crew was experienced. The aircraft had undergone routine checks. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary. As the engines roared to life and the plane lifted into the darkness, few could have imagined that they were witnessing the beginning of one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere remained calm. The pilots communicated routinely with air traffic controllers, following standard procedures as the aircraft climbed steadily to its cruising altitude. Every indication suggested that the flight was progressing exactly as planned. Minutes passed. The aircraft continued along its assigned route. Then came the final routine communications. A brief exchange. A normal acknowledgement. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. And then, silence. No distress call. No emergency transmission. No indication that anything had gone wrong. On radar screens, the aircraft was still being tracked. Then, in a moment that would leave investigators searching for answers for years to come, the signal disappeared. Just like that, a modern passenger jet carrying hundreds of people seemed to vanish into the night. The next few minutes would trigger a mystery unlike anything aviation had ever seen. As the aircraft continued its journey through the darkness, everything appeared routine. The flight had reached the point where it was expected to leave one region of controlled airspace and enter another, a standard procedure that takes place countless times every day across the world. For air traffic controllers, this handoff was nothing unusual. The pilots would acknowledge the transfer, establish contact with the next control center, and continue on their route. Simple. Predictable. Routine. But on this night, something was different. When the next control center expected to hear from the aircraft, there was only silence. Controllers waited. A few moments passed. Still nothing. They called again. No response. Another attempt. Again, silence. At first, nobody panicked. Radio communication issues occasionally happen in aviation. Equipment can malfunction. Frequencies can be entered incorrectly. Pilots can become temporarily occupied with cockpit procedures. But as the minutes continued to pass, concern began to grow. Controllers repeatedly tried to establish contact with the aircraft. Each call disappeared into the darkness unanswered. The crew, who had been communicating normally only moments earlier, seemed to have vanished. Inside the control centers, confusion quickly replaced routine. Operators checked frequencies. Supervisors reviewed procedures. Radar screens were scrutinized. Everyone searched for an explanation. Yet no matter how many times they called, The result remained the same. Nothing. No voice. No emergency signal. No indication of trouble. Just silence. What should have been a routine transfer between air traffic sectors was rapidly becoming something far more disturbing. And as precious minutes slipped away, a chilling question began to emerge. Was this simply a communication failure? Or was something much worse unfolding high above the ocean? By the time the realization finally set in, several precious hours had already slipped away. The aircraft carrying Ethan Carter, his crew, and everyone on board had failed to appear where it was supposed to be. Communication had stopped.
Radar contact had been lost.
And no one could explain why. What began as a routine flight was now being treated as a potential aviation disaster. Across multiple countries, emergency procedures were activated. Inside operation centers, phones rang continuously as officials attempted to piece together the last known moments of the flight. Every available detail was reviewed. Every communication was analyzed. Every possibility, no matter how unlikely, was placed on the table. Yet the most important question remained unanswered. Where was the plane? As concern grew, the search effort expanded rapidly. Aircraft were dispatched to scan vast stretches of ocean where investigators believed the missing jet might have gone down. Military crews joined civilian teams. Surveillance aircraft flew long hours across open water, searching for even the smallest sign that could lead them to the missing passengers. At sea, naval vessels began moving toward the suspected search zones. Crews prepared for a mission unlike anything they had experienced before. What they expected to find was wreckage. What they hoped to find were answers. But the ocean is an unforgiving place. The area investigators were forced to search covered thousands upon thousands of square miles. It was so large that even with advanced technology, locating a single aircraft seemed almost impossible. Day after day, search teams combed through endless stretches of water. They studied satellite images. They tracked ocean currents. Oceanographers studied currents and drift patterns. Analysts revisited satellite information again and again, searching for anything that might have been overlooked. For some investigators, the case became more than a professional responsibility. It became personal. Many understood that behind every technical report stood real people waiting for closure. Every data point represented someone's parent, spouse, sibling, child, or friend. Every unanswered question affected lives far beyond the investigation itself. Yet despite years of effort, certainty remained frustratingly out of reach. There were moments when progress seemed close. Moments when experts believed they were finally approaching the truth. Then another complication would emerge. Another contradiction. Another missing piece. The mystery refused to cooperate. As time passed, anniversaries of the disappearance became difficult milestones for families. Each year served as a reminder of how much time had passed without answers. Memorial events were held. Names were remembered. Stories were shared. Loved ones gathered not because they had found closure, but because they still needed each other. And perhaps that is what made this case different from so many others. The mystery was never only about a missing aircraft. It was about the people connected to it. The empty seats at family gatherings. The birthdays missed. The milestones never witnessed. The conversations that never happened. Behind every statistic was a human story. Behind every search operation was a family hoping for news. Behind every theory was someone desperately waiting for certainty. Years later, the disappearance continued to leave its mark on people across the world. Investigators carried unanswered questions. Families carried unanswered grief. And millions of people remained captivated by a mystery that seemed to challenge everything we thought we understood about modern aviation. Because despite all the searches, all the evidence, and all the theories, one thing remained unchanged. No one could say with complete confidence what happened to Ethan Carter's flight. And until that answer is found, the story remains unfinished. On a quiet evening, Ethan Carter boarded a flight that was expected to end like countless others before it. Passengers settled into their seats. Crew members performed their duties. Families waited at the destination, expecting reunions that would take place only hours later. Nothing about that night suggested it would become one of the most discussed aviation mysteries in modern history. Yet decades from now, people may still be asking the same question that emerged the moment the aircraft disappeared from radar. What really happened? After years of investigation, there are some things we know with reasonable confidence. We know the aircraft departed normally. We know communication was lost under circumstances that investigators still struggle to fully explain. We know radar and satellite information suggested the aircraft continued flying after its final routine contact. We know search teams conducted one of the most extensive recovery operations ever attempted. We know pieces of debris linked to the aircraft were eventually discovered across distant coastlines. And we know that hundreds of families were left waiting for answers that never fully arrived. Those facts form the foundation of everything investigators have learned. Yet the most important questions remain unanswered. What happened inside the aircraft during its final hours? Why did it leave its intended route? What sequence of events led to the disappearance? Was the cause mechanical, human, environmental, or something investigators have not yet considered? For every question that appears to have an answer, another question seems to emerge behind it. That is why experts continue searching. Not because they lack dedication, not because they have failed to examine the evidence, but because the evidence itself remains incomplete. Somewhere, there may still be information capable of changing everything investigators think they know. Somewhere within the vast stretches of ocean, there may still be wreckage waiting to be discovered. Somewhere there may be clues that could connect years of scattered evidence into a single, understandable story. History has shown that mysteries once thought impossible to solve can eventually reveal their secrets. Lost ships have been found decades later. Missing records have surfaced unexpectedly. New technologies have transformed investigations that once seemed hopeless. That possibility continues to motivate researchers, engineers, aviation specialists, and families alike. Because as long as questions remain, the search for answers continues. And perhaps that is what makes Ethan Carter's story so unforgettable. It is not simply the story of a missing aircraft. It is the story of uncertainty. The story of people refusing to stop searching. The story of families who continue hoping that one day the final chapter will be written. In a world connected by satellites, advanced radar systems, artificial intelligence, and technologies that allow us to communicate across continents in seconds, it is easy to believe that very little can truly disappear. Yet this mystery challenges that belief. It reminds us that despite all our advancements, there are still moments that leave us searching for explanations. Still moments that resist certainty. Still moments that remind us how much remains unknown. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is not that an aircraft vanished. It is that years later, despite investigations involving some of the brightest minds in aviation, despite extraordinary search efforts, despite every theory, analysis, and discovery, no one can say with complete certainty what happened aboard Ethan Carter's flight. And maybe the final answer is still out there. Beyond the shipping routes. Beyond the satellite tracks. Beyond the areas already searched. Waiting beneath miles of ocean, hidden from view. Waiting for the day someone finally uncovers the truth. Until that day arrives, the mystery remains unsolved. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the final answer may still be waiting to be found.